wonder, what have we done? Well, he has a significant learning disability. He has a significant learning disability, and school was never a place where he felt himself, where he felt right about that. So his brain got built by that experience. But the other day I was talking to him, and he said that there were 3 people, 3 teachers, who were just fantastic. 3 teachers in his entire academic career. And what were the characteristics of those 3 teachers? They were people who got to know him as a person. They found out that he loved music. Michael says that Pink Floyd saved his life in high school. Well, how many of his teachers knew what a fantastic drummer he was and how much Pink Floyd meant to him? Well, I'll tell you, the ones on his list are the ones who found that out. So what does that mean? It means that his experience in high school, which was full of skipping, was full of, unfortunately, encounter with marijuana once too often. The people who made a difference to him were the people who saw him for who he was and valued the gifts that he had. His brain, unfortunately though, was built to dislike high school. Now, here's the tough part. He's in a family where the other 4 sibs are doctors. So, how do we as a family try and build and buffer and do all that we can when his brain is so very, very different? So, our brain is built by our experience. Our brain is built by our experience, and when the experiences are negative, what we need are positive relationships to buffer that. I can say now that my youngest son has made it through a very difficult time. He's no longer has trouble with addictions, he no longer has trouble with depression, and he's in a wonderful relationship and loves the work that he does. But how would that have been if he'd been in an environment that was very different in terms of school, that understood him and understood his learning needs? So our brain is so much constructed. Now, when I'm talking about the brain, I want to just give you a very quick run through of what the brain is. So it weighs, here it is, weighs about 3 pounds. It's made up of neurons and all kinds of supporting cells. Weighs 3 pounds. So that's like, what, a couple of cans of Coke, maybe 4 cans of Coke? It is as soft as room temperature butter inside a very hard skull. There are trillions and billions of brain cells inside the skull, and so that's why we have to tell kids about wearing a helmet. Because if you've got this soft material inside a very hard object, then it's going to go schmuck. It's not going to do well when it gets bashed around. We've got different areas of the brain, and I'm going to be telling you more about them. So when babies are born, the brain cells are all in place, but they're not all connected up. A lot of connecting goes on in the early years, but then more connecting happens from the back, the occipital lobe, to the front in the adolescent years. We had no clue about this before there was neuroimaging. We thought that you were fit, you know, what you turned out to be was determined by what had happened early. So all of these different parts of the brain develop at different times and have different kinds of functions. So let me just move on to this next one. There's a difference between the right and the left brain, side of the brain. The left brain is more linear, language, logic. The right is more kind of spatial, artsy-fartsy kind of stuff, right? So the right side, more airy-fairy, kind of groovy man, keep the peace. Left, linear. And we have kids who are predominantly more left than right. We have a school system which is very much left-dominated. So if you've got a right-brain kid in a left-brain system, you can have some challenges there. But the brain science now is so very, very different than it was, even when I was in medical school. So yes, we knew the brain weighs about 3 pounds. Yes, we knew it was really soft, but we thought it was fixed early. We thought that the brain was kind of like a machine, that it could get broken. Now we know of it as much, much more plastic. Much, much more changeable. Why am I ranting on about the changeability? Because what I'm about to tell you may induce guilt. What I'm going to tell you about what it is that adolescents need to do well might have some of you, including myself, go, oh my God, I didn't do that. Oh, if only I had done that. So plasticity is the parent's friend, is the teacher's friend. What we know is that relationships matter and repair works. Relationships matter and repair counts for a heck of a lot. I have had, in my clinical work, in my work as a psychiatrist, I have sat with parents whose children have had gone through hell and back. And they have had an attitude to start that the kid has to bend and mold to their will. And so they've locked the door when the kids are late. And when the child that I'm thinking of specifically was raped and nearly murdered, the parents went through a very, very difficult time, thinking that had they parented in a different way and not locked that door, their child could have made it through the door, instead of going through what they went through. I've gone through with parents where children have, the parents have thought that it was a good idea. There's alcohol out there, so why don't we just have them drink at home? And the parents are upstairs and the underage drinkers are downstairs, and the daughter was raped. How can you live with yourself as a mum when you're trying to be a friend? So both the permissive as well as the brick wall parents suffer greatly, not because they have malicious intent, but because they think that's the right thing to do. I'm going to talk to you about positive parenting so that you can, when you get sent a picture of your son doing this, there is a positive thought that comes to mind other than what the... So, the adolescent brain is under construction. Now you might wonder, is it worse now than it used to be before? Well, here I have a bunch of quotes. This one is, our youth now love luxury. They have bad manners, contempt for authority. They show disrespect for their elders, love chatter in place of exercise, and on and on and on and on. Well, this was Socrates, who lived, Plato, who lived 469 BC. So if I remember correctly, that means you add 2016 plus 469, and you see that there's been thousands of years that people have complained about this period of time. So it ain't new, baby. It ain't new. Adolescence, Aristotle, even William Shakespeare talked about this. Now this is a quote from The Winter's Tale. He said, I would that there were no age between 10 and 20 and 3 and 20, or that youth would sleep out the rest, for is nothing in the between, but getting wenches with child, wronging the ancientry, stealing, fighting. Would any but these boiled brains of 19 and 2 and 20 hunt in this weather? So I think Shakespeare was brilliant, because what I'm going to share with you is what the anthropologists are telling us, that in fact, if we had not had these boiled brains that has discovered that you can hunt when it's raining and survived a rainy season, then we would not have survived as a species. That in fact, it is the adolescent brain and its unrest and desire for thrill-seeking, is the adolescent brain seeking other peers that has created humankind. Now, is that not a very restful thought? That without our teenage kids, we wouldn't frickin' be here. Well, that's true. You wouldn't be here tonight, that's for sure. But, so here's the reframe. Here's the reframe. When I look in the newspapers for stories about adolescents, what do I read? I read that people think that youth crime is on the way up. It's not. It's on the way down. I read that youth never volunteer. Garbage. My friend from the Boys and Girls Club has one of the issues that he has is that the kids volunteer for their hours, but they don't want to leave. They love giving back to others. But what do we see in the newspapers is all of the bad stuff. We did a project in Hamilton, and there had been a whole bunch of cars stolen from a parking lot. And so everybody of the shopping centre, and everybody was up in arms about this. And then we had a meeting with the police, and they had found out who it was. So, because of this, kids were banned from the mall. All kinds of consequences for this. It was 3 girls. 3 girls had punked all of these cars, but all of the adolescents in the neighbourhood paid the price for that. But you would jump to that. They had issues with shoplifting, and they were also cracking down on the teenagers for because of shoplifting. And then they did a study and survey to see who's doing the shoplifting. Well, it was little 60-year-old ladies like me who knew how to get a false bottom in the frickin' bags. So you can just, oh my, an eye-opener though. But we have a society that thinks once your kids are teenagers, then they turn into these aliens who leave us behind. We have to battle it. We have to fight it. We have to say our kids still need us, so they need more of our time, not less of our time. They are under construction, and when our little ones were learning how to walk, and we said, okay, come on, honey, come on and walk to mummy, and they fell down, we didn't say, well, there you go, I helped you once, right? That's not how development works. And yet suddenly, boom, we expect our teenagers in this very confusing, brain-changing time. So we need the knowledge from the science that says we as parents make a difference. This is a quote from the Journal of the American Medical Association. Parent connectedness is the single healthiest force in the lives of US teenagers. Parent connectedness. Now, what are the things that we battle? What we battle is misinformation. What we battle is how the media portrays adolescence. In fact, we need to have a revolution. There's a great clinician called Dan Siegel who's written a book called Brainstorm that talks about the excitement of adolescence and how we have to switch it. We need to get some of the teachers and the principals talking more to parents about the fabulous things that young people do, instead of calling everybody together because there's been a critical incident at the school. How often do we get these positive messages? So we need knowledge. And one of the things that you have as a phenomenal resource I've just learned about is at the back there, you have a family lending library. So there are hundreds of books and videos that are available to you as parents. If you go to the website, limestone.on.ca/lending_library, you get all of these books that even come to your kids' school for you to pick them up. Now, do not rely on your adolescents to bring them home. Your elementary school kids will bring them home, but your adolescents won't. So, fantastic resources. Check it out. You have your public health nurse there at the back. So, why hear about the science? Because it's going to help us. It helps us. If we have a scientific perspective on the biological changes and challenges, we'll be able to deal with it a little bit better. So here are 3 key points about the brain maturation in adolescence. So you've got your picture of the brain is developing, the neurons are all firing and forming in the early years, but then the scientists did some pictures And what they saw was that the brain was changing. The blue in this picture, can you see the blue in the picture moving to the front is more maturation. When the scientists brought kids into the scanner, they brought them in, the same kids in over every couple of years, over many years, and what they saw was something we didn't know 15 years ago. And that was that the brain significantly changes in these adolescent years. So it's not hormones. We used to think it was hormones. It's not hormones. Hormones absolutely are kicking in and doing stuff. But what we see in terms of the behavioral change has more to do with this brain becoming more mature, symbolized here by the blue. And what you see is it goes from the back. So you can think of young teens spending hours and hours and hours practicing physical things over and over again. The last area of the brain to make all of these connections is the prefrontal cortex. The executive director is the last part. So here we've got a mismatch. We have the I want to play, I want to do this, I want thrills, is developing ahead of the stop, plan, think. So you see the mismatch? Under construction. Under construction. So the three key points is that the brain matures during these years, but they become specialized at different times. The back to the front. The prefrontal cortex is our executive director, and it is not fully wired up until about 28 or 30 years is the latest research. It's not fully wired up until 28 or 30 years. So also that means that hot emotional thinking predominates in these years. Making sense? And the stop, plan, and think about it, the impulsivity is still present. The plasticity, this changing of the brain through experience, makes it an amazing time for life to be turned around. But it also makes it a terrible time because there is a big vulnerability. As that brain is plastic and moldable, it is more vulnerable. So here we've got this issue. We have a society and a biology. So biologically, so just from straight biology, the ability, say, to define when does puberty happen, that has not changed. It's got a bit younger. The ability to move from childhood into adulthood, so going from childhood being looked after by parents to adulthood taking on adult roles. In traditional cultures in Africa, it's still only a couple of years. It was only a couple of years for many of our grandparents and great-grandparents. But now, first period, 9 or 10, first baby is now 29, 30. So we have created in society a huge holding pattern where kids are not taking on adult roles. It's not that the kids are at fault, it's that our society has hugely changed. We now have a new developmental stage called emerging adulthood that I mentioned. Emerging adulthood is a time between 18 and 25, a time of self-focused exploration. It's a socially sanctioned moratorium from taking on adult responsibilities, also known as they've finished their first college thing and now they're back in the frickin' basement. They ain't moving on and taking on adult roles, right? Now it's really important to me in my clinical work because I can work with families and say, it's not your fault as a mum that they're still at home. And it's not your fault as a kid that you're still at home. Society has changed. Let me give you another example of how society has changed. So I'm 61, and back in the olden days, when you played musical chairs, you took away a chair. Just so you know, in 2016, oh my God, You take away a chair? Then somebody doesn't have a seat, right? It's the point, really, it's the point. But we have thought that self-esteem, protecting our kids, don't let them experience failure, has been so important. Boy, did we get that wrong. Those of you who heard Michael Unger, Dr. Unger, last year, nails that with too safe for their own good. So it's not the kids' fault, but they know. They know. I got this picture from my colleague. We were driving from Edmonton to Lloydminster. She wasn't driving the car at the time, but her son sent her this. Right? It's okay, Mum, Dad's already grounded me. So, let's run through this. Did he know that this was a dangerous activity? Yes, he did. Did he know there was a consequence for that dangerous activity? Yes, he did. Did he know that there may be an additional consequence when his mother got home? Yes, he did. So out. Now, what I want to know about this is what happened to the twin brother who was taking the picture? What was the consequence for him? So what's going through his head? What is going through his head as he's doing this? What do you think is driving him? The thrill is more important than the consequence. So it's not that they're not thinking. It's not that they're not thinking. It's that they are driven for the thrill. We now know that the adolescent brain, this thrill seeking, is a major driver of behavior. Now, again, the anthropologists say that it was that restlessness, that not being that content just sitting around the family fire in the cave and wanting to go out, that restlessness and thrill seeking that really has been responsible for the growth of the human species. But what we need to understand is that it is in fact due to brain changes. That the thrill seeking, the desire for change, the desire for excitement, is a biological drive. Now remember, I talked about temperament. So different kids are going to have different degrees of drive for it. Kids who are extroverted, on average, are going to be more intensely thrill-seeking than some of their peers. But here we have, if we ever needed confirmation that the male brain is different than the female brain, what you see here is, yes, this is the grey matter development in the front of the brain, and you see that boys' brains are bigger than girls' brains. Yes, but we do know that size isn't everything. We also see that girls' brains mature before boys' brains do. Sometimes a lot more mature than boys, but there's also perhaps a biological reason for that. Boys and the need for exciting adventure, moving, perhaps there is a good biological reason for that. So, the adolescent brain, why do they do the things they do? Because they are under construction. The brain is now in a period of time where there is pruning and remodeling going on. So the neurons are wired up together, they talk to each other through synapses, and so through up to adolescence, beginning and through adolescence, those synapses, the ones that get used, get strong.